Good morning. Today's talk is entitled Contemplation for Changing Consciousness. First, let's take a few moments to close our eyes, to take a deep breath, and to know this truth together. And that truth is that in the infinity of life where I am, all is perfect, whole, and complete. I know that there is one power and presence that creates all, sustains all, and expresses as all. I rejoice in my place in the midst of this one united power. I release all fears. I am free to be at ease. I release all limitations. I am free to be prosperous and healthy. My body is at ease. Every fiber of my being is made whole, made new, made vibrant and healthy. I release all anger. I am free to love and to be loved. I see harmony in all of my relationships, and I look to the harmony inherent in all of life. For I know that my place in this harmony is by virtue of the fact that I am a child of the universe. I know that where I place my attention grows in my life. I am in the right place at the right time for my highest good and greatest joy. I entrust myself to this process with a grateful heart, and so it is. Remember, you've been criticizing yourself for years, and it hasn't worked. Try approving of yourself and see what happens. I remember when I first heard this quote. It was May of 2014. I had been working overseas for about 3.5 years by then, and I had just moved across the country for a brand new job. There was so much to learn and to do. You've probably had that experience before, either in work or at school or in some other area of your life. For me, working in my second language was also a big challenge, because I remember not wanting it to take me any longer than it would have taken any other administrative staff to do the tasks set before me. But the truth is that it was taking me longer. Not only did I need to learn new office procedures, I also had the language barrier to contend with. You never really stop learning new intricacies in your second language after all. Part of the reason I was so slow was that I was so nervous about making a mistake and offending someone that it took me forever to write emails. It took so much courage to press send. Have you ever felt that way? Perhaps you have some big news to share that you're not sure will be appreciated. Or perhaps you need to set a meeting that's going to take a great deal of facilitation on your part. In my case, it was the language, but sometimes, of course, the contents also caused me some anxiety. And my thinking at the time told me that this was yet another example of my not being good enough. If someone else were doing the same job, surely they would be able to handle the intricacies of the task and also figure out how to make up the time loss when working in their second language. I was convinced that there was some secret to productivity I just didn't know, that everyone else had instincts that I just didn't have. I felt really small, and I was getting pretty scared that I was going to be exposed as a fraud. Imposter syndrome is real. I found Louise Hay, and this quote: "Remember, you have been criticizing yourself for years and it hasn't worked. Try approving of yourself and see what happens at that time." I think that my happening upon Louise Hay, and in particular, quotes like these, I consider it some kind of exquisite synchronicity. You might find that you feel that it is a coincidence, but for me, it was meant to be. I was looking online for some lectures on a topic, another book, one by Don Miguel Ruiz, and I found a New Thought minister in California who recorded and posted her talks on YouTube. And one talk she had mentioned a book by a woman called Louise Hay. and she mentioned that Louise taught something called affirmations and helped people to change their thinking, to change their life. What I found when I began listening to audiobooks by Louise, which I did when I was walking to the market or to the office or home from the office or to the gym, I found that she called me out on a lot of my negative thinking and challenged concepts of self, of thinking, and even of God. And while I had heard many times over the years that I needed to think more positively, Louise actually made me feel like it was possible. She made me think that I could practice thinking differently. And she made me believe that I wouldn't be doing it to appease anyone else or because I should start thinking that way. I didn't have to stuff down what I was really thinking, how I was really feeling. I could learn really to think differently. And if old thoughts came knocking, it didn't mean that I was doing it wrong. It just meant more feelings to unpack and more contemplating to do, more things to practice. I remember feeling astonishment when the sensations in my body would react to things I heard Louise saying on audio. I would be schlepping my groceries back from the grocer's and hear her say things like, "Remember, you have been criticizing yourself for years and it hasn't worked. Try approving of yourself and see what happens." And instantly I would feel tension drain away. My shoulders would fall back, my posture would change. This began my journey of contemplation as a spiritual practice. Remember that we've been talking about spiritual tools like meditation and relaxation, affirmation, and this week we come to contemplation. This means mindful reflection on words that are not necessarily our own, but words that help us to have that eureka moment, when the light comes in. Do you have a contemplative practice? Do you allow yourself some quiet time each day to read something that nourishes you, that soothes you, that challenges you to go beyond what you think is possible? Do you allow yourself some time set aside for such words? Contemplation works a lot like some types of meditation, where you have a specific focus of attention. In fact, some call this meditation, meditating on words. This is often used in a religious context. People talk about meditating on the words of Jesus, of the Bible, of the Quran, of Buddha, or of the sutras. In New Thought, we term this contemplation to help us remind ourselves of its difference from mindfulness meditation or of centering, which we'll talk more about next week. Contemplation has the ability to provide us with new avenues of thinking or new perspectives on things we've heard before. It's not about reading over the material to get through it or to amass more knowledge. It's really about taking these words into a relaxed state and allowing yourself to think deeply about them. It's about slowing down, reading only a little bit, and then trying to associate it with something in your life or rephrase it for yourself so it comes alive for you, or perhaps even committing little bits to memory so that you have them there when you need them. It's about turning them over and over in your heart, just as you would a precious stone, to catch the details, the way the stone glints in the sunlight, the way it feels in your hands. How many ways can you reflect upon what you read? By committing it to memory, by paraphrasing it in a notebook, by writing a reflective journal entry, by reading it aloud. I would highly suggest taking some quiet time to close your eyes and reflect, to contemplate it in a meditative and mindful way after your reading, and then perhaps writing down what comes up for you afterward. This is the spiritual equivalent of savoring your meal. Too often we choose mental fast food. We fill our leisure time to overflowing with things that keep our minds busy, but we don't always take the time to quiet ourselves down and allow ourselves to reflect on something that really nourishes and soothes us, that makes us feel a little better about ourselves and about life. I'm not suggesting that your favorite material that makes you laugh or really intrigues you or finds you engrossed in it isn't allowed. Far from it. I simply mean that I highly recommend carving out a few minutes a day, perhaps before bed, when you allow yourself to reflect on this sort of material. Perhaps just a page from a spiritual book, a quote from a teacher you like. It doesn't have to be hours of contemplation, although depending on your aims, that might be helpful at times. The point about this is to really take in the material, to focus on quality over quantity, to allow these ideas to sink into this garden that you are tending to in your mind. How can you take these words of wisdom that have come across space and time to come to you, and how can you plant them as seeds in the garden bed of your mind, and how can you then nurture them as new ways of thinking about the world? Oftentimes, when we come across something that really speaks to us, it doesn't necessarily feel like it's something brand new. Sometimes it feels like something we ourselves have had as an aha before, but hearing it in different words, in different ways, or even just having it come back to us spoken by somebody else or written by somebody else really helps us to reinforce those healthier ways of thinking about stuff, thinking about life. It really helps us to have a framework from which to work, right? A new lens through which to see things, and it helps us to remember that we are not alone. So this week, I highly encourage you to take those last few moments before you fall asleep to really take some time to read a page from a spiritual book, or even just a paragraph, even just a quote, and really take the time then to reflect on this, to contemplate it, to turn it over and over in your mind, to make it your own, in so far as you are turning it over and over and then planting it in the soil of your mind, right? Take some time afterward to think about it, to reflect on it in a meditative state, and then take some time to write about it if you have that time. Starting off with just a few moments a day, starting off with a few minutes a day, encourages you to remember that this is a sustainable practice. It's something that you're doing for a lifetime. It is not a marathon. It is not a sprint. It is a marathon. It is not time for us to try to stuff as much spiritual reflection into a few moments a day as we can. Rather, it is about allowing this to be yet another support, another pillar in your spiritual practice, another tool in your spiritual toolbox. Remember that contemplation can help you to change your consciousness because it can help you to carve out new mental avenues. And then that allows us to have new ways of thinking and speaking and doing. And remember that as we hold ourselves in mind, we are also held. The truth is that life loves you, and so it is.